I still remember the sound of crystal glasses that night, soft, polite, expensive, the kind of sound that fills a room when everyone's pretending to be something more than they are. It was Melissa's company dinner. She'd begged me to come, saying it was important for me to show support. I didn't fit there, the shiny suits, the fake laughter, the air thick with ambition and perfume. Still, I sat beside her, proud, trying to blend in. They toasted her success. Her latest real estate project had gone viral, luxury homes for people who already had everything. Someone across the table smiled at me and said, "So, David, what do you do now that Melissa's building empires?" Before I could answer, she laughed loudly. "Oh, David, he's great at staying grounded, maybe a little too grounded. The man hates risk, hates ambition." Laughter rippled down the table. I felt the smile on my face tighten. I looked at her, my wife, glowing under chandeliers, mistaking cruelty for charm. She reached over, touched my arm like it was nothing. "Come on, don't look so serious. I'm joking." A joke. Always a joke. Her boss leaned in, teasing, "That's what keeps her balanced, right? Every queen needs her steady rock." The laughter grew, and I sat there, a rock among balloons, steady while everyone floated away. When the waiter refilled my glass, I caught my reflection in the wine, older than I remembered, tired maybe, but calm. I'd built the kind of life people forget to respect. Quiet, honest, dependable. She leaned close and whispered, "Smile more. You look miserable." I didn't answer. I just nodded, finished my drink, and let her shine. After dinner, while everyone mingled, I walked outside. The air was cool, sharp, real. I stood beneath the restaurant's glowing sign and pulled my wallet from my jacket. Inside, behind old receipts and cards, was a folded copy of the first house deed we'd ever signed together. Our first home, small, worn, but ours. I'd framed the original years ago. It was the one thing I was proud to hang on the wall. That house wasn't built with money. It was built with weekends, scraped knuckles, and love that used to mean something. Now she called that time the struggle years. Funny how love turns into a phase once pride gets involved. When she came out to meet me, she was laughing with her co-workers. She saw me standing by the car, serious, quiet. "Don't look at me like that," she said, still smiling. "It was just banter. Everyone jokes like that." "Sure," I said. "Everyone." On the drive home, the silence between us felt heavier than any argument. She scrolled her phone, checking messages. I drove, watching the city lights blur into streaks of gold and white. When we reached the house, she didn't even wait. "I'm exhausted," she said, heading upstairs. I stood in the doorway for a while, staring at the framed house deed hanging by the stairs. The ink had faded slightly over the years. The glass had a small crack at the corner. Her wedding bouquet had once knocked into it. That little frame was a time capsule. Proof that we once believed in something together. Now it just reminded me of everything she'd outgrown. I sat on the couch, replaying her laughter in my head. Those words, boring, no ambition, they weren't new. They'd been sitting behind her smile for years, waiting for the right crowd to hear them. I looked around our living room. The same one I'd renovated with my own hands. She used to brag about that once. My husband built this place himself. Now she bragged about architects, designers, people who cost more, so they seemed more. Around midnight, she came down for water. Her eyes met mine briefly. "Are you really still upset?" she asked. "No," I said. "Not upset." "Then what?" "Just thinking." She sighed, half annoyed. "You take everything so seriously. You should learn to laugh sometimes." "Maybe," I said quietly, "but not at myself." She rolled her eyes and went back upstairs. When the door clicked shut, I finally exhaled. I'd spent my whole life making things solid, homes, foundations, plans. But I married someone who only saw beauty in things that sparkled. That night I sat at my desk and pulled out a blank notebook. I looked at the old house deed again, then set it beside me. The paper felt heavier than I remembered, maybe because of what it stood for. I took a pen and wrote 4 simple words at the top of the first page. This is where I begin. No anger, no revenge, just resolve. Because sometimes the cruelest thing you can do to someone who doubts you is to become everything they thought you'd never be, without saying a single word. There was a time when Melissa used to look at me with pride, not pity. Those early years were raw, honest, beautiful in their simplicity. We didn't have much, but we had purpose. I was 27, working construction jobs by day, sketching home designs by night. Melissa worked at a small interior shop downtown. She'd come home smelling like sawdust and coffee, her hair tied in a messy bun, eyes tired but shining. Back then, we didn't talk about ambition. We talked about progress. We planned one dream at a time, a house, a family, a future. I still remember the day I brought home her first surprise gift, a small kitchen table I built myself out of leftover wood from a job site. She ran her fingers over the grain and whispered, "You build things that last." That was the kind of woman she used to be, the kind who found beauty in effort, not expense. We were married in that same year, in a backyard ceremony surrounded by friends who couldn't afford tuxedos but showed up anyway. I wore a borrowed suit. She wore her mother's dress. We danced barefoot on the grass, laughing like the world couldn't touch us. Those were the days I thought love alone was enough. Over time, life got louder, bills stacked, dreams stretched thin, and work became my second home. Melissa wanted more, nicer things, better company, grander plans. I wanted stability. At first, her ambitions inspired me. I wanted her to shine, to feel proud when she walked into a room. But pride turned into comparison. Her co-workers drove luxury cars, wore designer clothes, hosted parties in homes I couldn't even dream of affording. She started talking about them, the successful couples. She'd say things like, "They just have drive, David. Don't you ever want more?" I'd answer, "I want enough to live honestly and sleep peacefully." That answer used to make her smile. Then one day it started to make her angry. The small house we'd built together started feeling like a cage to her. The table I made became outdated. My truck became embarrassing. The woman who once said I built things that lasted began tearing down everything we built. One night I found her crying in the living room. "I don't know what's wrong with me," she said. "I just feel like life is passing us by." I held her hand and said, "Then we'll build something new." She nodded, but her eyes already looked somewhere else. A few months later she met Eric, a wealthy investor whose smile looked like confidence but felt like control. I knew it the moment I shook his hand. He looked at me like I was a phase she'd outgrown. The night she told me she was leaving, it was quiet. No fight, no screaming. Just a truth she'd rehearsed 100 times. She said she needed to grow, that she couldn't keep pretending to be satisfied. I didn't stop her. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, staring at the house we'd built, the same house that was supposed to be our forever. When she drove away that night, the gravel crunched beneath her tires like a closing door. For weeks, the silence in that house was unbearable. Every wall echoed her laughter. Every room smelled like something missing. People told me I should fight for her. But love isn't a cage. If someone wants to leave, you hold the door open. That's when Sam stepped in. Sam had been my business partner before the recession forced us to shut down our small contracting firm. He'd seen me through everything, from our first blueprint to the last unfinished project. He showed up one evening with takeout and a bottle of whiskey. I didn't speak for a while. He didn't ask questions. Finally, he said, "You can't let her story end yours." I looked up. He continued, "You built homes for other people your whole life, David. Maybe it's time to build something for yourself." I nodded, quietly. That night, his words stuck with me more than the drink. He was right. I'd spent my life creating comfort for others, always putting my dreams second. Maybe it was time to design something that didn't rely on anyone else's approval. The days turned into months, and I learned how to live alone again. No music, no perfume lingering in the air, just the sound of progress and hammers, saws, the rhythmic noise of rebuilding. I started sketching again, designing homes that felt alive, not perfect, just real. Every nail I drove into the wood felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. And though I tried to bury the past, Melissa's words always found their way back. You have no ambition. Maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't have the kind of ambition she wanted, the one that fed on validation and applause, but I had endurance, and endurance outlasts ambition every single time. One day, Sam stopped by the workshop, wiping sweat from his brow. "You're working like a man with something to prove," he said. I smiled faintly. "No, Sam, just a man remembering who he is." That night, as the sun set behind the half-finished house I was working on, I looked at the open frame of the walls, the structure holding steady against the wind. I thought about Melissa, her laughter, her disappointment, her absence, and for the first time I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. She walked away from a life built on trust, because she couldn't see its worth. And someday, she'd realize that all the luxury in the world can't buy peace. I wiped my hands clean, looked at the sunset through the wooden beams, and whispered to myself, if she ever looks back, she'll see the man she underestimated. Starting over wasn't easy. Starting over never is. The first few months after the divorce were filled with silence, the kind that gets into your bones. But silence can be useful if you learn how to listen to it. I rented a small workshop on the edge of town, the kind of place most people would overlook. Cracked walls, leaky roof, a single dusty window that faced the sunrise. It became my sanctuary. Every morning I'd open that creaking door, roll up my sleeves, and get to work. No investors, no shortcuts, just sweat, time, and truth. I named my new business Grant Developments, a small construction firm with one idea: to build homes that gave people peace instead of pressure. Eco-friendly, affordable, durable. Nothing fancy. Nothing loud. At first, clients were scarce. People didn't believe one man could compete with the big corporate names out there. But I kept showing up. Every single day. Sometimes I'd stay up past midnight, drawing designs by hand, planning materials, budgeting down to the last screw. The silence of the workshop became the heartbeat of my new life. And little by little people started to notice. A retired couple here. A single mother there. They wanted homes with soul, not just shine. That's what I built. Not luxury, legacy. One afternoon, while I was reviewing blueprints, Sam stopped by with coffee. He leaned against the counter and said, "You've changed, David. You look lighter." I smiled faintly. "Maybe I just finally let go of what was holding me down." He grinned. "Or maybe you're building something that matters this time." I wanted to believe that. Still, some nights, when the work was done and the lights were off, I'd find myself scrolling through social media. Melissa's face would appear, flawless, smiling, bathed in gold and champagne. She'd post photos from parties, fundraisers, beach resorts. Her caption always had words like success, luxury, power. She looked happy. But there was something hollow behind that smile. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I wanted to imagine it. One photo stopped me cold. She stood on the balcony of a huge white mansion, the same one I'd helped build years ago as part of a subcontracting job. Her new husband, Eric, stood beside her, holding a glass of wine, flashing that kind of smile that hides more than it reveals. The caption read, "Finally living the life I deserve." I stared at that picture for a long time, not out of anger, out of realization. Some people measure life by what they own, others by what they build. She had chosen ownership, I had chosen purpose. Weeks passed. Business grew slowly. One day, Sam came in holding a newspaper. "You might want to see this," he said. The headline, "Grant Developments awarded City Sustainability Grant." My hands shook a little as I read the article. The city had chosen my designs for their new affordable housing initiative. For the first time in years, I felt proud, not because the world finally noticed, but because I'd stayed true. But the universe, I've learned, has its own timing for irony. Later that night, while researching suppliers online, I saw a headline in a local business journal. "Investment Group Under Fire. Emerson Realty Faces Massive Debt." Emerson Realty, Eric's company. I clicked the article. It was short, vague, mentioned restructuring, internal audits, possible liquidation. No mention of Melissa, of course, but I didn't need confirmation. I knew how those stories ended. Still, I felt no satisfaction, no victory, just quiet balance. The next week, Sam called me into the office, his tone curious. "Guess what property just hit the market?" I raised an eyebrow. He turned his laptop around. There it was, the same white mansion from Melissa's photo. For sale. I stared at the screen for a moment, the photo flickering under the fluorescent light. The pool shimmered. The marble floors gleamed. The staging was perfect. But even through the pictures, I could feel it. Emptiness. The kind of emptiness that luxury can't hide. Sam grinned, half joking. "You thinking of buying it?" I smiled softly. "Not yet." For the first time, I realized something powerful. That house, the symbol of everything she left me for, was collapsing under the same illusions she worshipped. A week later, another listing appeared. Price reduced. Then again, and again. Each drop in value felt like a quiet reminder from the universe, proof that what's built on ego never holds. Sometimes I'd drive by the neighborhood at night, not to gloat, but to remember. The iron gates were still polished, the driveway still immaculate, but the lights inside were dim. That house had been their dream. Now it was just a shell, beautiful, empty, for sale. I didn't stop the car. I didn't need to. Some things speak loudest when you let silence answer for you. As I drove back to my workshop, I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time, I didn't see Melissa as my failure. I saw her as my lesson. People like her don't destroy you. They reveal what you were meant to become without them. When I got back, I placed the old framed house deed on my desk, next to my company's new certificate of incorporation. Two sides of the same story, what I built then and what I was building now. And as I turned off the lights that night, I looked out through the dusty window at the stars above the half-built homes in my yard, and I whispered to myself. The house she left me for became the symbol of everything she couldn't keep. I used to think success had a sound, applause, engines, champagne corks. Turns out success sounds a lot quieter. It's the hum of your own breath when you realize you no longer need anyone's validation. Months passed, and Grant Developments kept growing. Our eco-homes were suddenly the talk of the industry, not because they were glamorous, but because they were practical, real, human. Then one morning, Sam burst into my office, waving a newspaper like a kid who'd just won a lottery ticket. "David, you might want to sit down for this," he said, grinning. Across the front page, in bold letters, "Local builder wins National Sustainability Award." It took me a second to recognize the photo. Me standing beside one of our completed homes, sunlight catching the wood just right. The article praised our use of recycled materials, our community-first model, our integrity. Sam slapped the paper down and said, "You've done it, man, from sawdust to spotlight." I chuckled softly. "I just kept showing up." "That's what they never do," he said. For a few seconds I let myself feel it. Pride without noise, success without spectacle. It felt good. But the universe never gives peace without testing how much you've grown. A few days later, Sam came back, this time quieter. "You're not going to believe this," he said. He slid his phone across the desk. It was a foreclosure listing. Address, 318 Maple Ridge Drive. My chest tightened. I knew that address too well. It was the mansion Melissa and Eric had called their dream home. The bank was auctioning it off within 30 days. Sam exhaled. Looks like Eric's empire finally ran out of gold. I didn't say anything, just stared at the screen. The photos showed an empty house, the same marble floors, the same sweeping staircase, but stripped of life. He studied me carefully. "You thinking of buying it?" I smiled faintly. "Thinking of visiting." The next week, I booked a private tour under a pseudonym. The realtor met me at the gate, a polished woman in her 40s with too bright lipstick and a sales voice trained to sound hopeful. "Beautiful property," she said as we walked in. I nodded, scanning the space. Every corner whispered memories. The grand foyer still echoed with the faint smell of her perfume, that vanilla scent she wore the day she left me. The living room walls had tiny hooks where framed photos once hung. I could almost see her laughter frozen there, pretending to belong. We walked through the kitchen, the same one I'd designed for the original owner years ago. I ran my hand along the counter. Quartz. Custom cut, I murmured. The realtor nodded. You know your materials. Yeah, I said quietly. I built some of them. When we reached the upstairs hallway, I stopped at a door slightly ajar. Inside was a study, mahogany shelves, half-packed boxes, and a faint outline on the wall where a painting used to hang. In one corner, a small, cracked photo frame lay face down. I picked it up carefully. Melissa and Eric, smiling, dressed in white. Her hand rested on his chest, diamond ring gleaming under soft light. The glass was broken across her face. I set it back down gently, not out of anger, out of closure. The realtor turned, noticing my silence. Would you like to see the backyard? I followed her through the sliding glass doors. The garden was overgrown, the pool half empty. The luxury had aged fast. Funny how nature always reclaims what arrogance abandons. As she spoke numbers, square footage, and renovation potential, my mind drifted to one simple truth. You can't build permanence on pretense. After the tour, she smiled politely. So, Mr. Graham, are you interested in making an offer? I nodded slowly. Yes. Full price. In cash. Her eyes widened. You're serious? Completely. She began fumbling with papers. That's incredible. The bank will be thrilled. I smiled faintly. Just don't tell them who I am. She frowned, a little confused, but didn't ask. The purchase cleared within a week. I returned to the mansion alone, keys in hand, standing in the driveway as the evening sun hit the windows. For a long time I didn't move. The house looked the same, but it didn't feel like theirs anymore. It felt like something waiting to be restored. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. My footsteps echoed, not with emptiness, but with ownership. In the living room, I found one of Melissa's old vases left behind. It was cracked but beautiful, much like the memories we shared. I picked it up and set it on the table. Then, quietly, I took out the original house deed from my jacket pocket, the one we'd signed years ago, from the home that started it all. That moment felt symbolic. One piece of paper that marked love once built, and another that marked lessons finally learned. I walked through the halls, imagining laughter that wasn't poisoned by comparison. I could almost hear the echo of my younger self saying, "You build things that last." Maybe I still did, just not the way she expected. The next morning I called Sam. "You really bought it?" he asked, half shocked, half amused. "I did," I said, "but not for her, for me." He chuckled. "So, what's next?" I looked around at the sunlight breaking through the tall windows. "Renovate it," I said. "Turn it into something worth standing in again." I spent the next few months quietly overseeing the renovation. No headlines, no announcements, no explanations. I replaced luxury with comfort, pretension with peace. Every repaired crack, every polished floor felt like redemption, not for her mistakes, but for my silence. People say revenge is loud, but healing is quiet. It doesn't demand an audience. When the house was finally finished, I stood outside under the same archway she'd once called her castle. This time, it wasn't a castle. It was a home again, simple, balanced, alive. And as I watched the lights glow warmly through the windows, I whispered the words that had been waiting since the night she left. Some homes are built with love. Others are rebuilt with lessons. The day they came back, the house was already mine, but I didn't tell them. Not yet. It was a Tuesday afternoon, sunlight falling through the tall front windows, casting long patterns across the polished floor. I stood in the living room overseeing a delivery, a few last pieces of restored furniture being moved in. That's when I saw their car pull up through the gate. Black Mercedes, same one she used to brag about. Melissa stepped out first. Even after all these years, she still had that practiced grace, chin high, heels sharp, perfume expensive enough to announce her before she spoke. Eric followed, his suit too loud for the moment, his confidence already cracked around the edges. The realtor walked them in, unaware of the storm about to unfold. Mr. and Mrs. Emerson, the buyer agreed to let you pick up any personal items you might have left behind, she said kindly. I stood by the fireplace, hands clasped, expression calm. When Melissa saw me, she froze. For a second, her lips parted like she'd seen a ghost. "David," she whispered. Eric frowned, glancing between us. "Wait, what are you doing here?" I smiled slightly. "Just making sure everything's in order." The silence that followed could have swallowed the whole room. Melissa's eyes darted to the walls, the furniture, the faint smell of new paint. It looked familiar, because it was. The home she'd once called her dream was now something she couldn't recognize. Eric tried to regain his footing. "Listen, man, we don't want trouble. We're just here to grab a few things." "No trouble," I said evenly. "Take what's yours. What's left anyway." The words landed heavier than I expected. Melissa looked down, her face pale. She walked toward the grand staircase, fingertips brushing the rail as if touching memories. "This place, it feels different," she murmured. I nodded. "It should. It finally belongs to someone who values it." Her head snapped up, confusion flickering across her face. "What do you mean?" Before I could answer, the realtor returned with a folder. "Mr. Grant," she said cheerfully, "the new ownership documents have been processed. Congratulations again." Melissa blinked. Eric turned sharply. "Wait. You're the buyer?" I met their eyes without hesitation. "I am." The air changed, still but charged. Melissa's hand trembled against the stair railing. Eric's jaw tightened, anger flashing beneath embarrassment. "You bought our house?" he spat. I corrected him gently. "No. I bought my work. I built part of this home years ago, remember? I just decided to finish what I started." The realtor, sensing tension, quietly excused herself, leaving the three of us in the echo of something poetic. Melissa's voice was barely a whisper. Why would you do this?" "Because some things deserve a second chance," I said. "Even if people don't." Her eyes shimmered, maybe with guilt, maybe with disbelief. Eric scoffed. "You're just trying to make a statement." I turned toward him calmly. "If I wanted to make a statement, I'd have invited the press. This is just business. The same kind you taught her to worship." He clenched his jaw, muttered something under his breath, and stormed out to the car. Melissa stayed behind, standing in the middle of the room that used to be hers. The silence between us was heavier than words could ever carry. She looked around slowly, the restored fireplace, the light fixtures, the handmade oak shelves I'd added, all simple, all intentional. Her eyes softened for a brief second. "I never thought you'd come this far," she said quietly. "Neither did you," I replied. Her voice broke. "I thought maybe you'd moved on." "I did," I said gently. "That's why I'm standing here." Outside, Eric honked impatiently. Melissa turned to leave, pausing by the door. "Does this make you happy?" she asked. I shook my head. "It makes me whole." As she stepped out, the delivery crew arrived, carrying new furniture through the door. They greeted me with respect, nodding as they passed her awkwardly. The neighbors across the street watched curiously, eyes wide, phones half lifted. For the first time, it wasn't me standing in shame. It was her. And I didn't need revenge to make it happen. Melissa turned once more at the gate, watching me for a second. I gave her a polite nod, the same kind you give to someone who no longer has power over your peace. When the car drove away, I exhaled. I looked around the house, my house, and smiled softly. Not with pride, but with gratitude, for every painful brick that built me into the man I'd become. The staff finished their work and left. The evening sun dipped low, washing the walls in amber light. I stood alone in the doorway, the same spot where she once told me I had no ambition. And as I looked at the reflection of my life in the glass door, I finally understood. Ambition isn't loud, it's consistent. It doesn't scream. It endures. I whispered quietly to myself. The man with no ambition just bought back his past, not to relive it, but to rewrite it. It was late evening when she came back. No car this time, no jewelry, no entourage, just Melissa, standing at the front gate like someone finally out of excuses. I saw her through the window, hesitation written all over her face. For a second, I almost didn't open the door, but some stories deserve a quiet ending. When I stepped outside, she looked smaller, like the years had taken something pride once protected. Her voice trembled. "Can we talk?" I nodded and led her inside. The same living room she'd once filled with laughter now felt sacred, calm. She looked around slowly, whispering, "You changed everything." I smiled faintly. That was the point. We stood in silence for a long time until she finally spoke, softly, defensively. "You bought this house just to hurt me, didn't you?" I shook my head. "No, Melissa. I bought it to heal me." Her eyes searched mine, desperate for anger that wasn't there. When she found none, her composure cracked. "You could have just moved on," she said, tears threatening. "I did," I replied. "This isn't revenge. It's restoration. You broke something that wasn't supposed to be sold, and I rebuilt it the way it should have been." She looked away, voice dropping to a whisper. "I thought you'd never succeed without me." I sighed quietly. "You mistook peace for failure." That line hung in the air, soft but heavy, the kind of truth that doesn't need to be repeated. She walked over to the window, staring out at the garden she once called a waste of space. Now it was blooming. Roses, lavender, green life in every direction. Her voice cracked. "I told everyone you didn't have vision. I told myself that too." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single folded document. Aged, creased, familiar. The old house deed. I placed it on the table between us. The same paper she'd once signed beside me years ago, back when love still meant building together. But this one had a new signature at the bottom. Mine. Alone. She stared at it, speechless. This was ours," she whispered. I nodded. "And when you left, I thought you took everything. But now I see. I only lost what was never mine to keep." Tears welled in her eyes, the kind that come not from heartbreak, but realization. I don't know what to say. "Then don't," I said gently. "Some things are better left in silence." For a long moment neither of us spoke. Only the faint ticking of the clock filled the room, steady, patient, unbothered. Finally she whispered, "Are you happy, David?" I looked around at the home. Calm, restored, full of purpose. "I'm at peace," I said. "That's better." She nodded weakly and turned toward the door. Before stepping out, she looked back one last time, her voice barely audible. "You really built all this without me?" I smiled softly. "No, Melissa. I built it after you." She lingered a second longer, then walked out slowly, the sound of her footsteps fading into the night. I watched her go, not with bitterness but closure. Some endings don't need applause, just understanding. As the door closed behind her, I looked at the deed on the table. The paper that once defined everything we owned. Now it represented everything I'd earned, and quietly I said to the empty room, "You left for a mansion. I found my home." A year later, the house no longer looked like a mansion, it looked like a home. Not just for me, for others who needed one. The sign by the front gate read, "The Grant Foundation Home, Building Second Chances." Where chandeliers once hung, now stood shelves filled with books and blueprints. The echo of hollow luxury had been replaced by laughter, hammers, and hope. Every weekend, Young builders and single fathers gathered here, men who'd been told they'd never make it. I taught them what my father once taught me. If you can build something with your hands, you can rebuild anything with your heart. Melissa was gone. Eric, too. Bankrupt, forgotten. Their empire just another story about money without meaning. But I didn't need to hear about them anymore. Some chapters don't deserve rereading once you've written better ones. Sam visited one afternoon, walking through the garden I'd replanted. He looked around, whistling. "You turned the mansion into a mission." I smiled. "No, Sam. I just fixed what she broke, the meaning of home." He nodded approvingly. "Guess ambition finally showed up after all." I laughed softly. "No, just patience." We walked inside, sunlight spilling across the wooden floors. On the wall near my desk hung 2 framed things, side by side. The old house deed signed again in my name, and beside it, a black and white photo of my parents, smiling, standing in front of the first tiny house they ever owned. That photo reminded me of something Melissa never understood. True success isn't about what you gain. It's about what you protect. Your peace, your integrity, your legacy. I sat down at my desk, watching volunteers move furniture and paint walls. They didn't know the full story, and they didn't need to. The satisfaction wasn't in telling it. It was in living the ending quietly. As the day faded, I walked to the window and looked out over the rebuilt garden. The same soil where heartbreak once buried me now grew life again. And in that stillness, I finally understood. I didn't rebuild to win her back. I rebuilt to remember who I was before her doubts. The sun dipped low behind the roofline, golden light cutting through the room. It touched the framed deed, the photo, and the words engraved on a small wooden plaque beneath them. "Revenge ends when truth stands tall." I smiled, whispering one last thought meant for the audience who'd understand. Would you take back what was once used to define your failure, or build something greater from it?